My name is Raphael Keele. My pronouns are he, him, and they, them. I am a Lehigh student and I'm majoring in English and computer science. So, my connection with the queer community is that I'm pansexual and I'm, I guess, non binary, gender non conforming. I don't know. Non binary, I guess. I'm going to say I'm non binary. The reason I found out about the prison abolition movement is because what happened was just that first I found out about the abolish police because I was following the fact that a lot of trans Black women were being murdered by the police at higher rates and it wasn't being talked about. It didn't become a known thing until recently, despite the fact that for the past 4 to 5 years, the numbers have been slowly rising. Trans Black women were talking about abolishing police, and I was like, oh my God, you can abolish the police. I didn't know that was even a thing. And then I went deeper, and then I found out about people who wanted to abolish prisons. And that's how I really got connected to the prison abolition movement. My personal connection is actually not within my queer identity. It's because I've had people, my family members, who went to prison too. So like once I found out about prison abolition and seeing the way that they were personally affected, I was like, okay, this is a system that I really do feel like it needs to go because I've seen personally the impacts. However, I do also have connection with it as a Black queer person because the carceral state punishes Black queer bodies simply by criminalizing sex work. They police race, they police gender, they police ability. So like if you're disabled and you're Black, if you're queer and you're Black, or if you're trans and you're Black, then you are more susceptible to state violence than if you were just Black, cisgender. I feel like people are very much in their own bubble, kind of. Even if we were to accept sex work as a thing, there would still have to be a lot of discussion about the ways in which what we currently use to talk about sex work is terms that privilege white women over Black trans women who are engaged in sex work, because the politics of the ways in which white women talk about sex work really fall apart when you look at the large numbers of unemployment to Black trans women. I think also that the Lehigh community, it's bad with queer people in general, but it's especially bad with queer people of color because they make spaces for people of color, but they make spaces for cisgender heterosexual people of color. So if you are a queer person of color and you go into these spaces, I do feel welcome and fine within these spaces. It's not a problem of feeling unwelcome. It's a problem of just feeling like, okay, well, this space was not made for me. And like when people talk, they talk about things that are rooted in heterosexual culture or cisgender culture, which is not something I can personally relate to.
Especially with queer and trans people of color, it's like you have to pick almost a part of your identity to adhere to when it comes to finding like safe spaces on campus. And it's not even like what you said, as a queer person of color, like going into, for example, like Asian spaces, it's like I don't feel unwelcome by the community there. I just don't connect in the way that I want to. I think even outside of the queer community, this is just a problem that Lehigh has in like its mission for inclusivity. A lot of the Asian spaces in my experience are focused in like either South Asian or East Asian, but I'm Southeast Asian. So like I walk into these spaces on campus and I'm like, I connect with you, but I don't like get you 100%.
Right.
There's a sense of like trying to create community, but only creating community for like individual like tunnel vision experiences when like that's not the case for how people like live their lives.
What's troubling about the prison system is that, first of all, it's a capitalistic institution. So we have a capitalistic institution separating people into two types of people. You're either guilty or you're innocent. And the problem with that binary is that it's just not the truth, and that all people are capable of committing harm or violence or things that would make them guilty. So therefore, our definition of innocent ultimately falls apart. Also, what people don't understand is that the institution of prisons are like they're ableist because their narrative, their biggest narrative for keeping point is psychopaths and sociopaths. Like they're targeting people who have disability and making it seem like those people are inherently violent, inherently evil people, rather than giving the resources that those people might actually need. Like the thing that white cisgender heterosexual people misunderstand about prison abolition is that it's a whole restructuring of our society that needs to happen in order for prison abolition to like be in full effect.
And people are so uncomfortable with the idea of like building from the ground up. They don't want to imagine like what it would be like to almost like go against the grain and like do something different, which I feel like is inherent to like the queer experience, and that it's like there's the idea of like queering things, and that like you are doing something radically against what everybody finds so common.
Right. I feel like queer people are just used to challenging normal things. So used to it. So like it does make sense that there's a queer abolition movement, like specifically for prisons, because like we're just used to challenging the norm all the time.
At least for me, that's like so exhausting, because it's like people of color and like marginalized folks have to do it every single day. But what do you feel like allies need to hear in their journey with this movement?
I guess allies shouldn't even really be thinking of themselves as allies, to be honest. I feel like, if anything, we're the allies and that they're the ones who are supposed to be dismantling the system and that we're just supposed to be helping. I don't oppose the term, though. Like, I don't oppose the term. But, like, I just feel like it should be, like, a switch in the way that they think. And then I also think that they should just understand that these systems that are set in place aren't really benefiting them as much as they think. Like, it benefits them on a very, like, it benefits them, but, like, not in a full freeing way. Like they don't really get to be as human as they think they're being with these systems in place. Like for example, our definition of like beauty is kind of like tethered to white cis thin people, but if you're white and you're cis and you're fat, then it falls apart for you. And it would just be more sustainable and better if we just didn't have these ideologies. Like you wouldn't feel anxious because you don't fit a norm, or you wouldn't feel like you're awkward just because you're not doing what everybody else is doing because of normative ideologies that dictate that you have to do something.
The way that like the 1%, or like the people that created like this structure,
Right.
kind of like feed it to people. It's like they really think that like they're liberated, and that they're like free to do whatever and to
Yeah.
whatever they want, when really it's like this is all set up to like nobody really wins unless like you were the people that created it. Like this was not created to benefit you, it was created to benefit the
Exactly.
creator.
It was meant for the Jeff Bezos of the world.
On the subject of like momentum, especially when it comes to like being queer and being like BIPOC, like feeling like you have to fight for yourself,
Right.
and show up. Like there's the question of momentum and how people like wait on things to happen or wait for that motivation to come. Do you have like opinions on like how momentum is talked about and like how people motivate themselves to like go out and like get shit done?
I think our discussions about activism and momentum are rooted in capitalist ideology, which is hilarious because as an activist, you should be anti-capitalist. You shouldn't be using, but the capitalist school of thought for activism is that you work to your fullest extent, which isn't fair, and it's actually not as radical as people might think. So the ways that when I feel like I need to keep going, or I need to get like I need momentum, is just by resting and self-care, because resting and self-care are actually radical thoughts that originated from Black feminists, and like they've just been highly consumerized by the capital market. But rest and self-care are radical things. By resting, you're resisting white supremacist grind culture that tells you that you have to be working at all moments, that you have to be doing this at all moments. We don't all need to be doing 100% radical work in order for change to occur. Like you get to focus on the human parts of yourself that needs to slow down, calm down, and rest before you move to the next task.